and welcome to the February 26th edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dowe and I'll be serving as your host this evening. And let me just start off by saying thank you so very much for joining us. We know that you utilize GBN Television, GBN Radio, and a variety of our social media platforms. We do not take it for granted that you have to tune in every Monday evening. So I always like by starting off by just saying thank you. This evening we're grappling with the root causes of the apparent rise in violent crimes here in Grenada, especially witnessed over the last week. I have three experts with me, and they will assist in teasing out what they believe to be some of the root causes. I will deliberately go from the gentleman furthest away, and furthest away in terms of distance, but closest in terms of our own affiliation. So I will start off with you, Jude, and you'll introduce yourself and, of course, your portfolio.
Good night, Grenada, and thank you so much, Colin, for hosting this program. So my name is Jude Hector, and I am the Executive Director for Adult and Teen Challenge Grenada. And so we are a non-profit organization, faith-based non-profit, and we do quite a lot of work with in the areas of drug rehabilitation, drug prevention, and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Tyrone?
Well, good evening to viewers and listeners. Thank you, Colin and GBN, for inviting us to be a part of this program. I'm the Director of Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic, and our agency was created in 1988, so we've been around for quite a while. And over the last few years, we've found ourselves at the forefront as a non-governmental organization, very much of the forefront against, in the fight against violence in its general forms, but more specifically, gender-based violence and violence against women and girls.
Okay. Evan?
Good evening to you, Colin, and obviously to all of those who are viewing and listening via television and the social media. Man, it's so good to be here, but unfortunately to discuss this topic. I'm here in my capacity as Vice Chair of the Evangelical Alliance of the Caribbean. We are a member of the World Evangelical Alliance, which represents all full gospel preaching churches across the world. In our case, all of the different national alliances in various countries across the region. Okay. And we play a vital role in any matter concerning society, family, and obviously matters that affects the general public. And so it's a privilege to be here.
All right. And gentlemen, let me just thank you all. And viewers, let me just signal, I think this evening is an evening where we would probably open up the lines a little bit earlier than we traditionally would. So probably about 9:15 or thereabouts, we'll open up the lines to calls and allow you to weigh in on the discussions and likewise to share your views. But Jude, let me just start off with you. You work with inmates, part of the work that you do is with inmates at His Majesty's Prison. Give us some insights. Who is there?
Presently, the numbers as of today at the prison, so we're looking at 374 persons overall. Of that figure, we have 371 males.
Okay.
And 4 females. So
okay.
375, yeah?
Right.
So we see that really what 90, a good 90, high in the 90s in terms of the population are males. Secondly, we see an increasing trend of younger men going to prison. And so, again, that's a trend we've seen. Just by way of another statistic, we also see that a number of persons, presently the figure stands at about almost 60, but high 50s of men are there repeatedly. Okay. So I think it's more than 50%, and more so, the higher percentage of that figure has some kind of drug or alcohol related, I guess, problem that's going to drive in their imprisonment. Okay. So these are some of the trends we're seeing. So troubling, really. It just means, I think, from the onset, we can say that if we can put our hands on a solution to the whole issue of drug and alcohol, let's call it rehabilitation or prevention, we can really begin to see recidivism in the prison start to be impacted.
Okay. So just to be clear, you're saying that the crimes for which these, I'll still use the term gentlemen,
yes,
were convicted of, quite often when they committed those crimes, they were under the influence of alcohol or some other form of drug.
Yes, the charge history, there is some, especially the repeated ones, right? And usually in those cases, they're not there for very long. In fact, there are men in the prison right now in their maybe 30s who's been to prison 20-something times. It just gives you an idea. So it means that in a given year, they might be in prison like 3 times in a year or more, right? So we're looking at short periods, but really actions and activities that's driven by a habit that if they can be free of that habit, they can become free men.
Right. And you're saying it's bordering on 60% of the population are repeated offenders. If I know this is not fully the topic, but let me just ask, should they be in prison at all? If you're saying these short stints, is incarceration the way to address it, especially if 60% are repeat offenders and they're being in prison for very short periods? One will question whether that really is the pill for this particular ailment.
I can give you my personal answer, and I would say no. I mean, in fact, I was on a forum just last week, this global forum, and they were looking at other means of helping persons who are struggling with drug and alcohol addiction besides prison. In fact, Trinidad piloted a program in 2021. It was very successful. I think Jamaica did as well. So looking at the whole case management system. So it's really a multi-sectorial, stakeholder approach to working with men who are struggling that does not use the prison as the primary means of let's say, treatment, because the evidence is really telling us that prison is not the solution. And
it's punishment, but it's rehabilitation.
No.
So it means that we go back out and then rinse and repeat and over again.
Yeah.
Okay. Tyrone, you serve as the director of the Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic. Do you see cases of violent crimes coming in for assistance, whether we're talking victims or we're looking at perpetrators that you would have to go after? And who are these perpetrators in general when we think of the violent crimes that will come before the council?
Well, we see both victims and perpetrators. We see a lot of male offenders, especially in the context of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence. There's quite an astonishing amount of that in Grenada. To just piggyback a little bit on what Jude was saying, part of the challenge we have is that we do not have many options other than imprisonment, right? We need to have an organized inpatient and organized outpatient drug rehabilitation programs that will provide an avenue for some of these people, both young and not so young, to get assistance that will A, keep them away from incarceration, and B, provide them an opportunity to get clean of the habit so that they may be able to lead more productive lives, right? We do see quite a rise in violent crimes of violence among perpetrated by young men, and that's very worrying because we do not just have persons in their 20s and 30s and so on. We're actually seeing teenagers, middle to late teenagers, many of them who are still under the you can call them juveniles because they've not yet attained the age of majority, 18, who are committing crimes. They're committing crimes on the school ground, on the playground, in their communities. And if these young men do not have programs that try to help them to be better negotiators, better conflict managers, better communicators, then eventually they will end up going into prison, and then they come out better criminals in the making. Right. Because unfortunately, when you incarcerate a young person who may be a first-time or even a second-time offender with persons who are more hardened, then it becomes a university of crime, and that is one of the challenges we have in Grenada.
But just go back on as to who you see, coming to you, age range, both as victim and as perpetrator, just from the work of the Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic, and we're zeroing in, of course, on the violent crimes.
we see a lot of men, primarily men, as the perpetrators. And then we see many female victims of crime, sexual crime, other types of violent crimes, right? We are, as I said, we're seeing a worrying number of younger men, juveniles, people who are not yet the age of 18.
So the gender-based violent perpetrators we were referring to earlier, were these juveniles or I mean, in terms of the crime? Because when you moved away, when you moved towards the crime on the school ground, playground, I wasn't thinking in terms of gender-based violence.
Right, no, those are more general violence, right? So young men who are fighting with young men who are taking weapons into schools to attack other young men, right? The gender-based violence or the intimate partner violence tends to happen more when these persons are sort of, going out of their teens, later teens, early 20s and entering relationships. But scarily enough, there are a number of young persons who have been sent to us to legal aid from the court system, from the police, who are still juveniles, and they're already charged with intimate partner type violence, meaning violence where they're hitting their girlfriends. And in many of these cases, these young men are not yet 18 and these young women are not yet 16. But the young men think it's perfectly okay if your woman or your girlfriend behave bad, you manners her. And one of the ways you manners people in our culture is that you beat them.
Okay. Devon, what do you believe is responsible for the rise we've been seeing in violent crimes?
There are several. Yes.
Also tell me whether or not you believe there is a rise in violent crimes, because I also would want us to be able to make a distinction between a light being shone on violent crimes as distinct from a rise in violent crimes. But if you believe there's a rise, what do you believe is responsible? And if it's just that a bright light is coming on these things now, then let's address that as well.
So I believe that there is a rise in violent crime, and I certainly believe that there is a rise in gun-related violent crime. There are many reasons, and I'll be very honest tonight, because I believe this is the type of conversation our nation needs. We need to introspect and ask ourselves, how did we get to this place where we have the type of violence that we are seeing now in our society? And it's worrying, and it ought to worry every Grenadian. We just celebrated, and we're still in the process of celebrating a jubilee as a nation, where we should be jubilant and celebrating everything that is Grenadian, everything that is good. And this conversation is needful in terms of how we are going to do the next 50 and what are we going to change. And probably certain things that we moved away from that we should probably look at going back to. And that brings me to one of the main things I feel is affecting what we are seeing today in the increase in violent crimes, which is the breakdown in the family unit. I believe that we have found ourselves so focused on careers, so focused on really making money, that we have moved away from really tending to the growing up and raising of our children. I remember several years ago when I was in the Ministry of Youth, I was tasked with a program to deal with what was then termed gang violence, where we had the whole construct of the Ginger Crew and the Bloods. There were guys who were on the Carnage who couldn't go as far as Belmont, and there were guys in Belmont who couldn't pass Wall Street, and guys from Wall Street who couldn't get up to the other roundabout, and it was that bad. People were living in very tight geographical areas and so forth because of fear for their lives, and we had to make some kind of engagement. And one of the things that we found is that many of the persons who were involved in those crimes were persons whose parents move away for seeking opportunities. Many of those children at the time we found were what we'll term barrel children, where parents move overseas seeking to gather greater economic means to provide, and there wasn't that parental supervision. And the truth is that the economy in Grenada is very tough, and in most cases both parents have to work to barely make ends meet, and that is at the expense of really spending time training children and shaping children. We have some parents now who probably haven't been well skilled in how to actually parent. When I was a teacher, it's one of the things that we battled with as well. Sometimes you seek to discipline children, correct children, and you would think the parents will be happy in that you're trying to shape the children, and the parents will come into the school compound and bust out in anger, and then you recognize why you are seeing what you are seeing from the children. So I think that breakdown in the family structure, and you cannot speak about the breakdown in the family structure without speaking about the emasculation of our males and marginalization of our males in our society. And I'm not speaking about this because I'm male or because I don't think females are important. I mean, I only have daughters, I don't have a son. But the reality is that we have to recognize the male has a distinct role to play within our societal construct. As someone who subscribes to the Word of God, you see that the males were called to lead, and if you wanted to destroy a society, you go for the males. When the children of Israel started to multiply in Egypt, and Pharaoh wanted to get rid of the nation of Israel, the decree that went forth was to kill the males, not the females, the males. That is where the line of attack is, always against the males. And when you think about it, I heard both Jude and Tyrone speak about crimes and the population of persons who are the perpetrators, vastly male. Why is this? And when you look at the statistics in terms of our population balance, so forth, obviously the last census, we don't have figures from this, but this is a population from the previous census that is majority male. So if you're looking at a population that has so many males, where are males? Certainly in church, I'm not seeing them. You go to universities, they're vastly outnumbered. But you go to the prison, and they're in very large numbers. You look at the statistics, and so what are we doing concerning our males? I know we had many years ago all this advocacy about empowerment of females and equality between males and females and so forth. But we have a male problem in this country, a significant male problem that we certainly have to address. This is a term that is sometimes used and some people don't accept it, but this whole concept of cultural penetration. And I think it has become even broader with the advent of social media, where the music of different cultures is able to penetrate. When you look at our neighbor in Trinidad, for example, some of the music that is termed Trini Bad dancehall music is really promoting violence. A lot of it is laced with crime lyrics, and this has penetrated. Just today, I went to a school compound, and on the walls were written in chalk "Fully 6." And some people may not even know about the gang affiliation of the 7s and the 6 in Trinidad, and the Muslim gangs and so on, the history that is embedded in the gang culture there, and how music has spiraled out of that. We have seen the same thing in Jamaica. And in both of these countries, we have seen the effect, the direct positive correlation between both. Trinidad recently has been ranked right out under Afghanistan in terms of safety. But that is the kind of thing that we are accepting. Sometimes we have events here and our promoters, the type of artists that is coming, what we are playing on our airwaves. And we have people here promoting positive music and hardly getting airtime. So all of these things are contributing to what we are seeing. If people, children, cannot respect their parents, they wouldn't have respect for people that they just pass on the street.
So let's separate the conversation so that we can truly delve in. And Jude, I don't know if you want to weigh in here, because the first aspect was that of family, and what Devon referred to, the breakdown of family. The reality is that 60% plus of our population is below age 30. Who provides guidance? Because at age 30, you're still a youngster. When we speak of the good old days, Granny was home, she was the matriarch of the family, and could have provided some guidance. Granny now probably is 35, a youth herself, who has to work in order to sustain herself, and she may or may not have other children. So, if we look at the family and we are to do a fair inspection of the family, what adjustments can be made to this reality in order to ensure that our youngsters, and I'll deliberately say youngsters, are behaving in a manner that we can be proud of as we celebrate our Golden Jubilee?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important question, Colin, and I think one that will cause, if we really want to address this properly, would call for some major decisions on the part of, let me call it, responsible parents. The challenge is, I think we are seeing a trend which people are becoming parents at younger ages, right? We see also a trend of single-parent households.
But let me challenge you here. Yeah. Is that true? Are individuals becoming parents at younger ages? Is that true? If we reflect on what was the age of our grandmother, and you do the subtraction of your parents,
right,
you may very well find that people are not getting pregnant at a younger age, one.
Right. And
two, a strong matriarch-led family, certainly within the Caribbean context, is not new to us either. So the absenteeism by the male is probably new, but right, the male not necessarily being in the house isn't. How do you respond to that?
But the thing is, my own family, right? My dad died I was 11 years old, and my mom was really the one that kind of kept the family together. A lot of the children in our community grew up with a lot of, there was a lot of grandmothers around. But however, we did not have this strong negative influence of things like music, movies, and so on, right? So even if the males were not necessarily present, the negative pull of the culture was not as great. Now we have a generation of young people who are very strongly negatively pulled in a direction that at a very young age they're exposed to information that they can't handle. In fact, I mean, as a psychologist, you will know they will tell you that a child's brain matures at around 25. Now we have children who are 5, 6, 7, 8. In fact, from the time they leave the cradle almost, right, they've been exposed to a lot of information that they can't handle. So as it relates to the family, I think the structure of the family has been compromised in the sense of, and in fact, just from my own experience with working with guys at the prison, I mean, that's kind of where I do a lot of work. A lot of the men there do not have a very strong male influence in their lives. Some of them do not know their dads, or if their dads were there, they were not very strongly influential. In fact, one guy on the blocks, drug dealer, told me one time, he said, listen, if parents do not have any plans for their children, I have.
Okay.
That was very telling. It means that as a parent, if you do not instill values in your child at an early age, it means that you now leave the society, and I'm saying society in a very broad context, to instill those values. And the product of that is what we see happening, I think. So we've lost our value system. Here's the thing, Colin. If I value myself, and I value you as a human being, there is absolutely no way I'm going to take a knife and stab you. Because I value you as a human being. You have value, you have worth, right? So it is said that hurting people hurt people. And when my own life is fragmented, I have no moral compass, there is no structure, there is no stability, it's very easy for me to do stuff that is violent to you, right? So family is really critically, and I mean, Devon is right, that the family unit is the building block of any society and any community. And when that is broken, and I think that is really what's under attack, really. Get the parents out of the house. Let the television grow the children. The social media grow the children, right? And so I'm telling you, my mom at age 7 years old or 9 years old, I was very strongly ingrained in a spiritual, cultural context that today is influencing my life. And I have passed that to my son. I have two boys, right? And I think we can see that trend continue. I'm seeing them, one of my sons now passing that on to his daughter, right? So I'm saying that if we parents, we take the time, and it might mean making less money. Right.
But is that fair? Is it fair to expect a parent, as you said, to make less money, to take care of themselves and their families, because the pressures are real?
Yeah.
The agricultural type of societies that we had, I say once breadfruit bearing children can eat, we have moved away from that. Right. And is it fair to expect the families to take less, one? And two, we blame the youngsters quite often, but who are their role models? Is same adults that they're learning from. Those behaviors are being modeled and replicated in our society. Tyrone, what would you?
Well, the thing is that what we once knew as family values were community values, right? My father was killed when I was 5 months old. My mother brought me up. But my mother's support system was a whole community of other women who were either bringing up their children by themselves as well, or had support from women outside of the community. The phenomenon of the fatherless household is not new. That's been there for ages. But there was an extended family within the family, and then a further extended family within the community that sought to ensure that children were brought up in a particular way. That is sadly lacking now.
And why is that? How did we lose community?
Well,
because it takes a village to raise a child.
Exactly.
We say it.
Right.
But we seem to have lost community.
Because we are now exposed to many influences that we didn't have there back then, as we talked about, the social media influence, the influence of music and so on. So, and this now desire to, especially in the era of social media, to keep up with the others, to be as glamorous, to have as many things, have acquired as many material possessions as the others seem to have. So people people seem to be preferring to be out there attempting to acquire. Then when you talk about the fact that so many mothers, parents are much younger now, parents who have barely had time to finish being children, to enjoy their own childhood before they themselves become parents. And you have grandparents who are in their late 20s and early 30s who do not have the time or the luxury of being home to be grandparents because they are young enough, as you say, to have to go out and work. And you have the mother and the daughter wanting to compete with each other and borrowing each other's clothes to go to the fete and so on. So we've lost a lot of these things because, we have sort of turned away from what the community valued as being together, children playing together, children learning certain values from the elders in the community, to everybody trying to just make it. But another reality, Colin, in the context of this conversation, we're talking about violent crime. And there's a whole phenomenon in Grenada of violence that is not crime. The violence that many of us learn because when you do something wrong at home, they beat you. You do something wrong in school, they beat you. The police pick you up and they beat you. You go to court and the magistrate can order you to be beaten, right? So there's a lot of violence that we accept as a normal part of a child's bringing up is to be beaten at every step, right? So for many people, violence is just a part of the thing that it's almost a rite of passage. We have been beaten, so we then in turn, when we have the authority to beat, we should do it.
Or we believe we have the authority.
Right. So our socialization has created this, thing where there is violence that is criminal violence, and then there's violence that is not crime. And unless we get just people to understand that all forms of violence is somehow wrong, right? Violence against each other, violence against your children, violence against your animals is wrong because violence brings pain, and pain brings discontent and frustration and anger, which then can lead to more violence. Then we're in trouble. We have to start having the conversation about how do we discipline rather than punish. And in many of our households, in much of our society, what we learn about is punishment, which is about making somebody feel pain so that they will not be tempted to do bad things again. Okay. If you inflict enough pain, they will behave themselves.
All right. We're at the point where we take our first break. So we are discussing the root causes of the increase in violence that we're seeing in Grenada, but we'll continue discussions shortly.
When you need someone to help you to your feet, I'll be that beacon to your highest peak. Oh, I'll be right next to you, no, I will never leave. Come on, take my hands, we got everything we need. Cause you can look to me whenever you're in need. Just call on me and I'll be on my way. I'll be by your side, never to divide. Till life right there with you. Wherever you road lead, we'll make your dreams come true. Nexa, 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 right next to you.
Nexa Credit Union, with you wherever your road leads.
Have you heard about the new Softweave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue. Available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines, and we're delving into the root causes for the rise in violent crimes. Devon, before we left off, I heard Tyrone speaking of, sometimes mommy and granny competing, as it were, both youthful. But there was no mention as to where the men are who are to be the role models to teach the young men how to be good men. Are we giving men a free pass?
I don't think we should. And it's something I've felt very strongly about in terms of our society, because historically, men haven't been held responsible in terms of raising children. Even today, I still receive paperwork from the hospital and from the registry when you're dedicating children with no father's name on the document, and I already find that is an injustice to the child. I believe that every child has a father, and that person's name should be there from registration. You are present for the conception, you need to be present for every step of the way. Sufficing to say, I've seen a change in our society in that a lot of young men who have grown up fatherless are standing up to their responsibilities. I don't know if persons have observed, but you will see a lot more men spending time with children, which is something that we have not seen. Men would be present, but not so much present in the spending time on upbringing. Breadwinner, go to work, come back. And I think that's something that has changed, because while we had many households where men wasn't always consistent, they were consistent in providing sometimes resources. They are farmers, they garden all day, they come back, they're tired in the evening, so they're not really contributing so much in the values that they put in the children, but the mothers would be home and take care of the children. That has changed because of the economic pressures, perhaps also because of materialism. We have just become a more materialistic society, and our values shift us.
The price of a pound of sugar is the price of a pound of sugar. I mean, so we can claim to be more materialistic, but at the end of the day, you have to have food on the table, and one salary quite often doesn't cut it.
Well, certainly you can cut it now with almost a total absence of agriculture, and with sugar being the type of price that it is now. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it comes down again to values. Because even in cases where we have single parents household, like I grew up in a single parent household for the most part, my mother will go to work, but when when she's finished with work, she'll be home with us, spending time with us. But it has changed. You go to work, and then on the weekends, there's always a show. There's always a party, or you have to spend hours in the beauty salon doing your nails, your lashes, your wig, your weave, and whatever else. And our men, for the most part, are out hanging out, liming, and then you have the hangover from the party that you have on by Sunday, and then Monday you're back to work again. So it's a whole cycle. And how we grow the children now, we hand them a tablet because that keeps them quiet. It doesn't bother. So the idea is to keep that child from bothering me with my life, because I have my life to live. So you try to get my attention, here is a tablet. We as parents, we are glued to our devices, and these children are being grown by social media, and they are exposed to what is out there. And this is what I was referring to when I spoke about cultural penetration, the music. And even now, I think there is a negative side effect of the accessibility that children have to the internet and devices and so forth. It has its pros. We have to get with the times.
And the question, are you advocating for some form of censorship?
Yes. And I really think as a society, we have to make hard decisions. And not just censorship in terms of what the content our children have access to. Certainly that, because some children have free access to Netflix. When I go on Netflix as a parent, even some of the content I don't think is good for me as an adult, far less a child. But not just that, some of the music that we allow to play in our society should certainly be censored. Some of we can be a society where violent crimes is not accepted, but yet that is the music that is proliferated in our airwaves, in our different events and so forth. I cannot, as a parent, and it's something that I feel strongly about, attend school function with a child and the type of music that is played is violent. I mean, you just cannot have that. We are sending inconsistent messages. As a society, we have to decide what we value. We have to decide as a society that we are not going to allow ourselves to go into this place where not just, I heard people speaking about foreigners being unsafe. I'm more concerned about Grenadians being unsafe. You cannot feel unsafe in your country, the place that you belong to, where you call home. You just can't.
Tyrone, are we holding our men accountable? And in the legal aid and counseling clinic, I know sometimes you serve as a conduit for payment of maintenance for children. Are we? Well, first of all, why does it have to come to a court-mandated situation where a check has to be dropped off by legal aid and counseling? One. And two, quite often the men are let off the hook. I don't want to have anything to do with a man. So you don't make him pay in order to stand up to his responsibilities of raising that child because you want to have nothing to do with him. And therefore he gets off. Are we seeing too much of that?
Absolutely. We're not holding our men sufficiently accountable. The responsibility for that lies on the older men who are supposed to be mentoring and showing these younger men how to be men. Responsibility is also on some of our women folk who do exactly what you say, who decide, I can do it on my own. And the phenomenon of the strong matriarch in the home has been a blessing for Caribbean society, but in some ways it has also been a curse, because a lot of men feel, well, my mom is doing it, my woman, my child mother, she'll handle, right? So we are not holding men sufficiently accountable. More needs to be done in that regard. But to echo something Davon said earlier, I'm also very happy to see the amount of younger men in their 20s who are fighting daily to have a role in their children's lives. And unfortunately, a lot of them are being pushed out by the mothers. A lot of young men, literally every week I sit with one or two young men who are saying, I'm giving money, but I want to do more than that. I want to take the child to spend time with me and for the child to get to know other members of my family, etc., etc. But the mother is not allowing me to do that. And sometimes when you get in touch with the mother, as we do, say, I don't want him or a woman to have nothing to do with my child. It's my child. I want to make the child come out inside of me. But then, if the young man if he doesn't stand up financially, she runs to court because she feels she has a right to the money, but he doesn't have a right to a relationship with the child, which is a disservice to the child. So there are a lot of things that we need to try to put right, but we need to understand the dynamics that are driving some of these things. Now, if you speak to old old social workers from Trinidad and Tobago from 25, 30 years ago, they will tell you that they were warning the system 30 years ago that Trinidad was going to come like Jamaica. And the system said, no, that can't happen here. And 15 years ago, some of us in this work were warning the system here that if we're not careful, Grenada is going to come like Trinidad. And they said, this is not going to happen here. So we sort of turned a blind eye, pretended that we were okay, that nothing bad was happening, and suddenly we all behaving as if we're so shocked. And when something like what happened last week, or the different incidents that happened last week, come home to confront us, then we all, we behave in a panicked way. So we have to understand that we didn't get here overnight. A lot of these issues were percolating, they were coming, we were watching them, but we were telling ourselves it wouldn't be so bad, we'll be okay.
Respect, lack of respect for authority, Jude. How have we gotten here? You see people wrestling with the police, and of course videos going viral where there's open disrespect to police officers in uniform. How did we get here?
I think Devon kind of hinted at one of the pathways, and I can go back to my own example of my two sons in school, PVC, and there was one time we bought a belt for them to go to school, and went to school with the belt, and the teacher told them, listen, that's not the appropriate belt, you shouldn't come with it, and they were not pleased, right? As a parent, we could have said, you know what, we bought that belt for you. Listen, we're going to go and make sure that you wear that belt to school because that's what we. But we said, listen, you're in an institution. They have rules and they have laws. We may not agree with the rules and the laws, but you have to be responsible. If you want to be a part of the institution, you have to walk by the rules as a parent. So I think it's back to the point of if as parents, and I think the breakdown did not start with the teenager and the police. The breakdown started with the child and the parent. So I think we've started having, and I know as children now are a lot more liberated. When I was growing up, our parents really had us on a very short leash, as it were, for good or for bad, right? When adults are having conversation, as a child, you couldn't just butt in and give your 2 cents, right? You'd be quickly told, listen, this is not your place. So I think some of the parenting styles we've adopted did not come from our culture. I think we've adopted a lot of parenting styles from North America, but look at where it got them. So I'm thinking, Colin, on the respect issue, so it comes from the nurturing of that child at home. We have cases where parents are calling, in fact, not some time ago, a parent who has a 11 or 12-year-old out of control. And I'm thinking, but hold on. Colin at 12 years old, there was no way I could disrespect my mom. In fact, I was 18 years old. I was working at Cable. Let me expose my business here. Come out from playing big man, right? Come out in a that time I was playing wild, running away from church and all of that stuff. Came home late. My mom was up waiting for me. I had to sit on a chair in the middle of that small house where we were, and I had to be up. And as a big man, like my other brother was saying, he's a big man. Hello, that's my mom. Respect is due. So I think we have to start teaching children, respect parents, respect elders. As a boy growing up, if there's an elderly lady or so in the street, good morning, miss, good afternoon, miss. And if I refuse to do that, she can report to my mom and I'll get disciplined. Right? So I think society, we have to really, children are passing you now like you're invisible. Again, that we get that from the bigger culture.
But do we say good morning when they pass us straight?
You mean to them?
To them.
Well, that's another story.
And
right?
Because it's building the culture. If we're building the culture, if they pass, they say nothing.
Right.
You pass, you say nothing. It means the culture is saying nothing. And the question is, when we see these things happening, as adults, we need to stand up in defense of our culture. We can't let it slide and then throw our hands up in the air and saying, well, look at what the children come to.
Right.
What have we been doing and what will we do in order to stop that slide? Devon, let me just ask, just and you can make the point you're making, but has our churches and our community leaders failed us?
I just want to, before I comment on this, just to make a statement about what you asked related to respect for authority. And I believe authority has to start respecting authority. And that's the model that we have to create for our youngsters. And I think to a large extent, the persons who we should be looking at to be role models in our society has disappointed us. And I'm speaking as somebody who is younger, how disgusting it is sometimes to listen to persons who hold top office, even in the parliament, and how they speak to each other. That is authority, not respecting authority, and our young people are looking at that. Children, especially school-age children, attending the same parties with adults, dressing the same way as adults. That is authority, not respecting authority. Because in my time, I couldn't even join the conversation of two adults.
Right.
No, you can jam in the same party with your mother.
We do have a call on line, so let's take that call and come back. Good evening, Colin. Welcome.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Both guests and hosts. Very interesting conversation, I must indeed say. Long overdue in this country's time that we delve into the serious matters that affect or have affected and will continue to affect our society, and to consider seriously the things to be done to correct them. I would like to make a suggestion humbly from my corner. I hear the gentlemen all agree. This, amongst other things, very important. Cultural penetration that has been hurting the world. People in the north do what they do and they enjoy it, and so they force it upon us. A new form of colonialization. But hear this. Recommendation, brothers. Let us seriously consider putting our constitution under serious scrutiny, where a title will be built in, amongst many other things, dealing with, pay attention as I end here, civil duties of the population, man, woman, and child, everybody. Civil responsibilities equally, man, woman, and child, everybody. And of course, tied into human rights. We have to discuss this. We have to reconstitute this nation with the involvement of all and sundry, so that we can get this thing correct. New constitution for Grenada now. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, will you?
Thank you very much for that contribution. As we talk about the leaders, this is one, because we must get to resolutions.
Yes.
So here you have being tabled. But as I ask, in terms of whether or not our church and community leaders have failed us, let's transition likewise into some of the resolutions, and the caller certainly has brought us into thinking of those.
Yeah, I really believe that the church is a reflection of what exists in our society, because the leaders within the church comes from the society. The members of the church comes from society. So what you see in the church is a reflection of what's really happening in your society. I believe that, yes, within church circles, there have been some behaviors that are not in keeping with God's standard, and there have been a lot of compromise that have been accepted. But I think the problem is greater and deeper, in that our society have come to a place where, to a large extent, we believe we can exist without the values exposed in the Word of God. We believe that that is a cake. It is not needful for today. And what we are seeing is a result largely of this. Part of the thing that affected our behavior in the past is that we are a society that valued the Word of God. We valued what we were told. And part of that is the respect for human life and how you treat people. And when you throw out the Word of God and God who created us and give us really the Bible as a manual, and you decide you're going to live by whatever is your own morals, then you end up with the problem that we're having. And that's why I'm concerned when I hear people speaking about personal morality and things like that, because the Word of God has no such thing. It is really what is enshrined in the Word. God created this universe. We are given the blessing and the opportunity of life to be here. And this is the standard by which you must live. A failure to do so have certain consequences. And the consequence we're seeing is what we have seen over the last several months in our country, the rise in violence.
Jude, let me bring you in here. Prayer answers all. But at the same time, God helps those who help themselves. So I want recommendations for us to start helping ourselves, and then God can intervene and assist us. What are some of the things that we should be doing to turn this around?
Let me offer a couple. One, parents spending a bit more time with the children instead of having them just play with, like the social media thing. Men taking some more responsibility and even at the expense of reducing maybe some of our leisure time, but invest in our lives, especially in the young men who may not have that strong male figure, but who you can see evidently need some help. Spend some time with them, right? Maybe taking them out, have a drink, just spend some time, because some of those, I believe, and because the problem has really been, and based on all the evidence we have, is really driven to a large extent by young men, or men in particular. It means that we have to really put the male under the spotlight, right? So in other words, whatever programs we can think about, we have to think about how we can reach those men. We have to go to where the men are. So, and again, Devon spoke about the church. And again, listen, there are some great things happening in Grenada, right? We understand that. But the strength of our nation really depends on how strong our weakest link is. And if we don't take care of the most vulnerable in Grenada, we cannot, our Vision 75, our Vision 25 or 75 will be impacted. So what can we do to help? Spend some more time investing in real rehabilitation programs. Look at alternative options to prison. So it means collectively we need to, from our parliament, our government, our civil society, our churches, the judicial systems, let's really, and take some benchmarks, right? Trinidad just did a couple of years ago something really wonderful there. Jamaica did. So let's see what benchmarks we can use and implement some new, outside the box kind of thinking, right? We can't just go with things as they used to be. Maybe one more. Let's play more. Yeah. Right? I think, life is tough, but like again, my own benchmark growing up, moonlight night, as communities, turn off the television, right? And just go outside. Let's go have some fun. Play some cricket in the road. In fact, a real novel idea that came from Carrick was up there recently, marbles. There are some team sports where children can learn conflict management, they can learn social skills. So let's kind of get into some more team type activities that takes us away from the screen. Yeah, so I'll just offer those as some suggestions.
All right, Tyrone, before I go there, what has captured our attention in recent weeks was the seems rape with violence, and what in the public discourse seemed to be gang violence. I don't know whether from your wearing your hat of legal aid and counseling, what can bring three individuals to come together to collude to commit these violent crimes? And I'm saying violent crimes simply because rape is violence. Let's be very clear on that. And I will also want to posit, is it because we are growing up in a society where it's the domestic violence, gender-based violence that you refer to is open. Incest is quite common and condoned. As a young boy growing up, you're brought a thing, and that is not, frowned upon. And are we then creating a society where three individuals can collude to go on a spate of rape?
Yes, we are, and unfortunately, what we also have thrown into the mix, in the absence of cohesive family units, is this sort of gang mentality where three young men feel individually we've been ostracized, we've been hurt, we've been pushed away, we've been beaten, but if we come together as a unit, three together as stronger than one, and we know at the new family we belong to each other, so where you go I go sort of thing, right? All for one, all for one and one for all. And this is going to continue to happen because so many of our young men don't feel that they have a cohesive unit to which they belong. Because their home, especially for a lot of young men who are growing up in single female-headed households, or sometimes even in the so-called nuclear family.
But I want to object to the single female households, and permit me to. All three of you share just the same, right?
But I was going on to say, even in the so-called nuclear family.
Right.
Because we have those contexts as well, where people come out of what we would want to believe are perfect or proper situations, but they still have not been nurtured properly. They still feel that they don't belong. They still feel that everybody's out to get them. They still feel that they don't have enough, and by themselves they cannot accomplish enough. So this idea of the gang, right, the herd mentality, if we come together, we're stronger, and therefore let's come together. And if we don't, because if we don't prey on others, they will prey on us first, right? So you do unto them before they do unto you, right? And then we see those kinds of crimes. Now, it would have been great if within this trio, one person would probably have said, that doesn't make sense, let's not do that. But then the power of, the individual to stand up and say, no. The two of you could do it, but I'm not getting involved. Then you feel like you're standing out. And one of the things we've lost is that individuality. A lot of us feel that if we're not part of a gang, we're not valuable in and of ourselves. So we kind of give in to the mentality of the others, and then we end up being led by the others. So
Any other comments, Devon, on what causes the formation of gangs? Because it's part of the discourse now in the gun violence. Last Friday, guns fired market in town, guns fired by the vendors market in Grand Anse, on the heels of man found dead in St. Patrick. And then we were also dealing with the news of the 3 escapees, and 4 escapees in total, 3 and 1, and the missing couple. What has brought us to this point? Is it one of the economic stressors? Are we talking just belonging and hence gangs? Would you posit that this is drug related and that is what is fueling? So there is some type of feud between rivaling gangs. What do you think it is?
I think I can only speak from experience with working with gangs, and I believe one of the things is the sense of vulnerability, that by myself I'm vulnerable and therefore I need support. And that vulnerability usually comes about by a feeling of lack of safety. And I was just thinking today and trying to figure out what have we done as a nation to deal with safety and security in a real way. We do a lot of infrastructural projects, and oftentimes people say that it's a police job. To me, policing is very different from just the general construct of safety. The police is not the only entity responsible for safety. Over time, in all of our administrations, we have a Ministry of National Security. What does that ministry do? What does the Ministry of National Security do? If you have the police force, and you can say, well, the police is doing it. So if the police is doing it, why do we then need a Ministry of National Security? And safety is a real problem. People do not feel safe. And even in the case of guns, guns begets guns. So if you have a society where there's a proliferation of guns and there's a lot of violent gun crimes, everybody's going to feel like they need to have a gun, because suddenly you can't run to a gunfight with a cutlass, right? And it's that type of behavior that causes this gang culture. Outside of that, I think economic isolation. People feeling a sense that nothing is working for me, so I'm going to be deviant to what exists. Is a sense of a type of protest of the status quo. And I remember when we were dealing with a situation that existed back in the day in Grand Anse with this whole gang violence, one of the ways that we found a resolution was bringing people to the table to discuss. And these guys had a lot of frustration about what was happening in society at the time. We bring police together with gangs, with decision makers, policy makers. They felt that there was no opportunities for them. And oftentimes, it gets so difficult that ways of earning living outside of the law seems more attractive. more lucrative. And some people are forced into that lifestyle. They found themselves in it and they just cannot escape. And when you look at the gang culture in Trinidad, especially in the case of Laventine and Bitam and those districts, you automatically like almost born into a gang, in the sense that if you belong there, you are branded as being part of that gang and you're afraid for your life otherwise. And so to get a sense of security, you became part of that gang. And sometimes we take these things for granted, but we ought not to, because what happened in Trinidad in 1990 with Abu Bakr started out of gang violence. And even the Muslim gang in Trinidad suggested that part of the gang problem in Trinidad is because the gang is not allowed to police the street. We saw what happened in one of our incidences here where the police couldn't really do their job because the public started getting involved. So my thing is, what is the confidence with our police force? And how does our police feel? Because these are men too and women.
I want you all, and any one of you can respond. How should the police officers react when they have someone in custody and they are being stormed and tugging, as it were, civilians pulling the person who's in custody away from the police? What type of reaction would you expect of the police?
Well, in a case like what we saw, and with what exists now in our police force, where our police force is grossly undermanned, the police force is understaffed, the police force do not have the right equipment to operate. In that case, there's hardly anything the police could do. They were outnumbered. They couldn't shoot everybody that was present.
Why not?
You just can't do that. It's violence too. That is violence in itself.
But in defense of upholding the law, should they not have acted forcefully in order to stop this? Because the next time, the next group will believe they can do the same thing and get away with it.
And what measure of force would we suggest that the police will use?
Well, they'll start with simple and intensify as needed.
Okay.
I'm putting it out there because we got to act.
I certainly think that the police should be allowed to do their jobs, and I think that is where we need to start. We need to recognize that these police, men and women, are persons who are doing great service to our country. This society cannot exist without them. In fact, these are people who leave their family every day to do an honest day's work. So the mentality that we have as a people concerning police needs to change. And in a lot of cases, these guys are working very long hours and a lot of pressure. When many of us are able to be home with our families, they are out there protecting our families. And whenever something happens, the first thing we do is call, oh God, and after God, we call the police, right? And therefore, they are very important. And the mindset of our society needs to change. So I don't think necessarily the answer is use of force. The answer is getting our people to understand the value of our police. And this is why the value system in our society is a problem. But even when you look within the police force and what is happening, the mass resignation that we saw after the last set of promotions that happened within the force, all of that is very concerning.
Well, no, I don't know that is true, and let's keep the conversations honest, please.
Well, I could present.
Because I don't know that we had mass resignations, one, and I know that we have continued having problems after promotions. So let's not do that.
No, we have seen,
because we have also had lawsuits after promotions in the past.
But that is what I'm talking about, Colin. We have seen over the years lawsuits.
Right.
We have seen over the last set of promotions resignation by senior officers, and I can't call names if you need me to. There are facts to suggest that, right? And those things create a problem. You can't look at this and say, well, when there is promotion within the police force, people take the force to court or the Public Service Commission to court. Persons are resigning, and we think everything is okay. Something is wrong. Something is wrong within there, and that can affect the moral of people within the force itself. So if you're an officer in the line of duty and you should arrest somebody and you have the public coming against you, in that moment you have to make a decision. Do I try to fight and executing my job? Do I feel that there's no value in doing that? Do I feel I am valued enough? Or I just can't be bothered?
This is probably endemic. But it is time for our break. So our final break, viewers, we will take it now, and then we will come back, and certainly we would want to hear from you.
Planning and Development Authority of Grenada, PDA, is enforcing regulations to curb illegal, disorderly, and unauthorized development in several locations throughout the state of Grenada. The authority is concerned that structures mainly associated with vending are negatively impacting the environment, has undesirable public health and sanitation consequences, present obstructions to vehicle and pedestrian traffic, can become projectiles during adverse weather conditions, and generally affect the aesthetics of the nation. The PDA will work along with stakeholder ministries and institutions to effect the demolition, removal, and disposal of structures which fall in the category of illegal and disorderly development, commencing January 2024. In this regard, persons who vend in or occupy such illegal structures are advised to secure their personal belongings and have the structures removed ahead of the planned PDA demolition operations. These actions of the PDA have become necessary to safeguard and protect public health and the environment, ensure the safety and well-being of all citizens and visitors, discourage any future disorderly construction, and encourage compliance to regulations pertaining to physical development in the state of Grenada. This is a message from the Planning and Development Authority of Grenada.
Welcome back. We're dealing with some of what we believe might be the root causes for the increase in violence, and we do have a caller online, so let's take that caller. Good evening, caller, and welcome to you.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm here listening to the program for a little while, and I find we deal with punishment too much instead of more law. Because if you really check on you, 10 young men in jail, they come back, they go back, they come out, they go in jail. So let us try a little more love with the young men. Instead of sending them to jail, let us see if we could work with them outside of the jail and see perhaps things could change. You see, you send them in jail, they make sure you lock them up in jail. Let us try to keep them out of the jail, send them to church, make sure they go to church to the one they choose, you don't choose it for them, and let them be around people that will nurture them and show them more love, because to me, you put them in the juvenile center, they get punished there. You could hear the complaint. They in prison, they punish, so let us try a little more love.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, caller. One is love, but Jude, when we left off, we were talking about the respect for police and policing that must come from our society. What is your take?
I totally agree. The thing is, without a strong, let me call it a strong deterrent for criminal behavior, then criminal minds and criminal people will be free to do whatever they want, right? So in other words, we need to have a strong law, a strong police force, strong respect for them. We value their contribution. I mean, listen, if you remove the police force from Grenada tomorrow, Grenada will be in chaos, right? I mean, and the amount of work that they perform in all the different areas, we're going to see a major disruption to society as we know it. Right. So yes, they're not perfect, but we have to appreciate the work that they're doing. We have to teach our children to respect the police. I respect the police. You may not agree with the police, but they're the police, right? Yeah. So I think we should respect them. We pray for them. We support them. And they also need help, right? Ways that we can encourage them. Listen.
All right. We do have a caller in line, so good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good evening, sir. And good evening to your panelists. First, I will say that we have a leadership crisis. Yeah? And second, we have a societal breakdown. Now, it is coming from many different angles. Take, for instance, you have male and female in the home. Parents have lost the ability to to govern because of their economic situation. Yeah? It is much easier for a female to get a job than a man to get a job. That is dismantling the home. You educate the children properly, and eventually you put them home, you cannot give them a job. Yeah? And even though you give them a job, you give them a small salary. Take, for instance, the cost of living. That salary may not be adequate, and the stress set in. Yeah? So how, in the face of all those things, how do you want the youth to behave? Now, I used to be doing writing, and those predictions which I made, and we're not even at the tip of the iceberg yet, yeah? But one of the most important areas here, we're not talking that, it is the economy. The economy is not growing to take care of the youth, take care of the society. We need to develop economically, and it is the economy to do that. And if we're not positioning the economy to provide jobs, to provide source of income for people, we're going to continue to break down. We must, and all our leaders, our business people, have to take the responsibility to ensure that the economy grows and grow markedly to prevent what is happening at this point in time. If we fail to do that, I don't think we'll have an excuse, because the youth, they are restless. The society is restless. And this is signal that, look, we are speaking here in body language. How do we solve this?
All right.
Very serious.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Economic stresses have us where we are, or at least can prompt some of the decay that we see in our societies. What do you take?
I agree, but I also want us to be wary that it is not only because of economic stresses or poverty that we have some of these challenges. Because from where I sit at Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic, we see violence in every sector of our society, right? So fairly well-to-do people with money in the bank are just as likely to commit crimes against their partners and their children, violence, as persons who have no money in the bank, right?
We do have another caller. Let's take that caller and we'll be right back. So, good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We have come down a bit hard on the youngsters. There are different levels of crime, and generally speaking, youngsters are involved in petty crime, stealing and things of that nature. But we have to look at it on the other side, where adults are concerned, where crime is concerned. We have adults involved in crime of corruption, embezzlement, and those types of crime. So we have to look at it in a holistic manner, both sides, the young and the old. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if I'm just to encapsulate what I think the caller is saying, is that once there is crime begets crime.
Yes.
And if you normalize crime by sweeping some under the carpet, then the roosters will come home to roost, and you'll see violent crime, because that's the one I can rob. I can't embezzle.
Yes.
So I would rob. Yeah. Comments.
I think the caller has a great point in speaking about crime, because we don't oftentimes speak about those types of crime that is committed and sometimes affect people even more. More people are affected and marginalized as a result than what we see on the streets.
We have another caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, welcome. Go ahead.
Yes. Pleasant good night to your panelists and yourself. I want to give an example of how I grew up. And let us look at what's happening today. I grew up in poverty. My mother had it worse. And the community I grew up in, they grew my mother's children. She was a single mother. They give us food, they give us clothing, they give us love. They look at us when we do wrong things. They make sure we go to school. So that keeps the community calm. We could have been doing the same thing with guys like Ran and the rest are doing today. But you know what happened? The level of hypocrisy that goes on in this country, it is too much for the young people. Those of us who have and could afford, we continue to fight to get more and more every day. And we forget that we going to need security in the community. We going to need to show people that we're concerned about them. And therefore, the police will have the hard work they have to do. I have been listening from the opposition leader to all those big bureaucrats you could find, how much they're concerned about Grenada. What have they ever done to change the course that young people going in Grenada? In terms of the food they eat, the condition they live in, nothing these people have ever done. I live and I saw Rand grow. And I know he did not start the way he was. He started with a single mother who nobody cares about in the community. She had several children, and Rand was one of the ones who goes about keeping people things to eat to survive, and then he sell a little, and that grew into the level of ignorance. He hardly used to go to school, but the community don't care. If you open your mouth as someone in the community, people looking at you as if you're the wrong one. So it's very hard for you as an individual to lend a hand to help. I am so sorry for these young fellas because I know how I grew up. And I know how it is to resist the temptation of trying to do wrong things to survive. So what we need to do, the solution, is for us to start giving, is for us to start educating people to let them know that our cell phone and our pretty cars and our big houses are not the answer. We would not be able to protect ourselves in those luxuries if we continue living that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Comments?
Excellent. I think I agree with the caller that the acquisition of things does not represent safety. And one of the solutions, as we continue to look at solutions, is for us to really introspect, look at ourselves and decide, am I true? To thine own self be true. Am I true to myself? Do I make a conscious, deliberate effort to help when and where I can? Mm-hmm. Do I take enough of an interest in the welfare and well-being of others that I make it my business to see that they too are okay?
All right. We have another caller online. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Yes, good night, gentlemen. Yeah, I'm longest while. But sometimes we fail to realize that we don't just have a physical or a psychological problem. We have to understand that Grenada problem is a spiritual one. And Proverbs 14:24 says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to every people. So we have to understand that we have to look on the spiritual side also. Not just physical. We cannot solve this problem just by physical things. When a nation seems to forget God, we're in trouble. We have to remember that God sets up government for a purpose, for a reason. And if government is not functioning in the true purpose, we have the church. If the church is not functioning as the church, then our nation is going to fail. So I want us to look at that perspective spiritually, because that is, I believe, is one of the most serious problems that we have, spiritual. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
All right, and that caller goes in terms of our moral compass. Where do we get that direction from? And it should be grounded in our faith.
Oh, certainly, and I think the caller raises a very valid point as it pertains to where we were as a society compared to where we are today, in terms of what we value. And to a large extent, as I indicated earlier, we have really moved away from biblical values. And the truth is that many of the things that we focus on and that have been mentioned as solution, love for others, all of these things are grounded in the Word of God.
True. We have another caller line. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Yes, good evening. I think we have now more female teachers at our schools. I'm wondering if a more concerted effort should be made at attracting male teachers at our schools. West Indies cricket is today in that situation because of less males at our schools. I think in Grenada probably now we have only female magistrates. What can we do? How are we ensuring that the male feel empowered? I think those are situations that we need to look at. So as we go forward. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. More female magistrates, more female teachers in the schools, more females at universities, which will translate into more female magistrates and more females as teachers.
Certainly.
So what do we do to ensure that our boys stay the course in terms of education, which can lead to empowerment, which can lead to socioeconomic stability? But we'll address that, but we have another caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Yes, good night, sir. Very good and interesting program. I was listening to the program all year on, but I get to realize that we are blaming people who are not responsible for the problem. I heard they were talking about the fathers, right? Where are the fathers in the home? But let me say this. Life makes up of choices, and choices have consequences. Why don't we let people stand the consequences of the choices they make? You see? So if we keep going that way, we always defending and defending. Pastor Devon is there. I thought he was equipped and coming with the gospel to let people know exactly what the problem is. Because when God called Moses to lead the people, not to please the people. And before I go, let me say this. Every man is tempted when he's drawn away by his own lust and entice. So this thing is a spiritual problem. Pastor Devon, let me hear you respond to that specifically, because you should know best. You're fighting a battle that is a physical one. And I think that's where we lose it. It's not a physical battle, it's a spiritual battle. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, caller, thanks for that. And I believe that you are exposing views that I postulated earlier concerning the return to biblical values and the Word of God. I spoke about this at length earlier. And certainly, I believe the source of the problem is multifaceted. Obviously, spirituality is very important. And we have to begin with returning to God. And sometimes when we speak about spiritual problems, people believe all we need to do is just pray. We don't just need to pray. We need people to change the relationship that they have with the Creator, with God, and to really, in a serious way, pursue a relationship with God. Because it's not just, the church come and pray whenever there's an issue. It is more so people making a decision that I'm going to live by the Word of God. I'm going to subscribe to the Word of God. Because we can pray for you, but if you have the view that you do not need to love your neighbor, you do not need to respect anybody, you don't have respect for the sanctity of human life, prayer alone would not fix that. It begins with repentance. It begins with acknowledging that we are created. We didn't just come into being. We are created, and the creator is wisdom. Give us a manual called the Bible by which we must live. And it's time some of us pick up the manual and use it, because without it, we are burning the equipment, right, which is our life.
Well, Jude, you yourself, you're a theologian, so I know you're formally trained. You're not wearing the hat of pastor, but how we have a next caller, so let's address the caller and then come back. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening to you. I want to give my piece on your story here. You're looking for the root cause for the rising violent crimes in Grenada. Listen, we have a major problem here, and it's a shame to see that our leaders cannot address the problem that we have. This problem that we have is more than twofold, it's more than threefold. We have a lot of migration problems has failed us. Look at something here, man. When you go to church on a Sunday morning, you don't see anybody, none of our youth in church. Every young man in Grenada stand on the street corner with a bottle in his hand. From Friday to Monday and every evening, we live in a drunken society. And when people's mind is numb, we become dumb. So the only thing these people can resort to is crime and violence because there is no trend of us to keep them in line. Listen, there is no follow-up from the aged to the young in Grenada. Everybody doing their own thing. In which country have you ever heard a government declare 1 year of celebration? The year of celebration that we declare late is for theft, for Roman and drunkenness. And unless we turn things back in this country, we all is going to be sorry for the things that we do. We're not helping. Our schools not helping our children. Our church is not helping our children. Our government is not helping our children. We electing liars.
All right.
The people who we elect in government, they turn their tongue like nothing. They tell us one thing now and come out and tell us something later. It is a shame. And it's time that you people here, you on the panel, should have the discussion. Don't hide and tell. Say it as it is and let everybody know what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, caller. And we did hear, and it still comes back to the spirituality and our commitment. And how do we get that youngster who has turned back to that spiritual grounding? How do we ensure that that youngster who have turned does not influence other youngsters that will cause us to continue on the downward trend that we have? What type of conversations do you have with those individuals who are now imprisoned, for example, Jude, and some thoughts on how we can turn the corner?
Yeah, I mean, Devon raised the issue a while ago of our relationship with God. Of course, that is foundational. In my own life, I think I mentioned earlier, on that kind of level of spiritual foundation I had from a young age from my mom, right? Baptized at 9 years old. Did not mean that I had a perfect life. Did not mean that I did not stray off. But the point is, at least there is a compass. There is a place that I could say, but that's my reference point. I remember one time I had some friends who saw me in a party in Fantasia. And they said, but Jude, Hector, what are you doing here, right? It's like, it's not your place, right? I'm not saying, I'm just making a point that at least they understand the value system I had. And so I think if every child in Grenada is really given at an early age a strong spiritual foundation that's rooted in a relationship with God, Colin, our prisons could be empty, our juvenile center could be empty. We can see a much better society. So I agree with the callers. I mean, of course, we understand that the human being is multifaceted, right? So you have the spiritual, which is the core, you have the soul, which is the mind, the psyche, and all of that needs to be cared for, and then you have the body. But most of our effort is really geared at satisfying the body. I need a good job to get more money to get clothes, get a good phone, and all of that stuff. But the deeper, valuable part of our lives, the spirit, we neglect. I was thinking of our national anthem, in fact, in preparing for this, right? Hail Grenada, land of ours, we pledge ourselves to thee, heads, hearts, and hands in unity to reach our destiny, ever conscious of God, being proud of our heritage. May we with what? Faith in what? Faith in God and courage, aspire, build, advance as one people, one family. God bless our nation. Listen, our national anthem is rooted in God. It's founded on the recognition that we need God to survive. Right. And I think we have to have more conversations about God, not just in churches, but in the public space. Read Bible reading, right? In fact, there was a major project recently where I'm almost sure every Grenadian can have a Bible. Just as we have the pins, every Grenadian can have a Bible. The question is, are we reading the Bibles? Is the Bible now our rule book for living? And so, Colin, really, we can talk about all the economics, and the caller is right. In fact, at the time when Israel was most prosperous economically, there was most more dark spiritually. Right. And sometimes economic prosperity really turns us away from God because we don't become very self-dependent, right? Oh, I can get all my stuff myself. Right. So really, I applaud that, and I say, Grenada, listen, I love my country, and I think we all do, but let's get back to our foundation, which is God.
And I think what you, and we're going into closing comments, which I'll have, but just as a leap off, the two things were twinned as you recited the national anthem. Our faith in God, yes, and our progress as one people. Absolutely. And that was a repeated theme as you go through the national anthem. Yes. We will do it together. Based on our faith and grounded in our spirituality. Certainly. And in terms of the closing comments, I'm going in reverse order. So, Devon?
Really, this discussion has been a pleasure. I know that the public is incensed with what have happened. And certainly, I believe that as a nation, we have to introspect. Not just because of what transpired now, but at this point of Jubilee, we have to introspect. What is the Grenada we want to be? What do we want to maintain? What do we want to change? As a people, who do we want to become? And there are a lot of things that we see in our society that needs changing. But there are also some good things that needs maintaining. And there are things that we may have lost that we need to also be able to bring back. And I believe that is for all of us to do. Right. Individually, we can point fingers, but we must introspect.
Tyrone?
But we also need to introspect in terms of our values as a community. But those values come from somewhere. The national anthem is a really good starting point because it was a rallying cry for all of us in terms of what we valued collectively. We need to now get people to reconnect with these values, to understand that together we are stronger, we're better, we have to be each other's keeper. We have to look out for each other. We have to respect those who are looking out for us. We have to respect those who are protecting us, and we have to ensure that every day we remember what's important to us as families and as a country.
June?
Yeah, there is hope. You know, I really want to end on a very positive word, right? There is hope. But that hope will come about, will become a reality for us when we make some conscious decisions. So let's start with the anthem. Colin, we sing it a lot and we stand attention to it. Let's really think deeply about it and begin to live the anthem. And I think we'll be much, much, much better off.
Mr. Jude Hector, Tyrone Buckmeyer, Devon Rashi, thank you so very much for joining us this evening and having these discussions. And to you, the listeners and viewers, thank you for spending the last 90 minutes with us on Beyond the Headlines as we wrestled with some of the root causes for the spike in violence. And in summary, yes, grounded in our faith, remaining rooted in that faith. But I would also like to challenge us to stand up for Grenada. Stand up for what is right. Don't throw your hands up in the air. It's not time to surrender. It is time for shoulder to shoulder. Let us soldier on in defense of the good values that is uniquely Grenadian. It's a pleasure being with you this evening, and I look forward to hosting sometime very shortly. Good evening, all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.